Hey everyone, it's Colin with Eagle Eyes Mystery Productions. Thank you for joining me and welcome. And today is exciting because we have our first Xenos tutorial for Warhammer 40k, and where better to start than the Eldar. And Eldar are such an iconic part of 40k, and one of their most iconic units, if not their most iconic unit, is the Farseer, especially Farseer on a jet bike, or Farseer Skyrunner, as they're called now. I love this model. I think it's a super elegant kit. It's also an absolute blast to paint. Some really cool shapes and details to this model, and kind of go bold or go home kind of scheme for this. And the scheme that I've chosen to paint is called Craftworld She'enshar, and it had a brief mission, I think, in the Harlequin Codex, and with no art or anything like that. So I just kind of made up my own scheme. It's a bone and orange scheme with a little bit of black detailing. The reason I chose this craft world rather than one of the kind of standard craft worlds is orange is a pretty tricky color to paint, so it gave me a good opportunity to paint that. Bone is also a little tricky to get a really nice tone, and there are a lot of different tones that you can go with bone, whether you're doing a brown or kind of greenish. This one's a little greenish brown, which you'll see as we progress through the tutorial. And really, it's just an awesome model to paint. This one I will be giving away when I'm done. Even though I had a small Eldar force in this scheme, I don't have it anymore, and I don't plan on starting one anytime soon. So I'll be giving it away at the end of this tutorial. And the other reason I chose to do a Farseer Skyrunner is because the feature of the jet bikes that I did for my army was the hex mesh on the front of the jet bike cowl. So I'll be showing how to use these hex mesh airbrush stencils from Fallout Hobbies. These things are fantastic. They have a ton of uses. This is, of course, just one of them. But so I'm going to be going over how to use one of these stencils to get a really cool kind of detail, really cool effect on the model without having to go in and freehand it, because ain't nobody got time for that. So what we're going to do is we are going to base coat the bone parts of the model, which are going to be the entire jet bike, this little part of the gun on the bottom, and then his robes. Really, the only parts of this model that are going to be orange are going to be the two shoulder pads and then this sash that goes around his waist, and we're going to paint those by hand. So it's not worth airbrushing those and then doing all that masking and all that stuff. It's just not time efficient. So we're going to paint those by hand, and then when we're finished with doing the bone base coat, then we're going to break out the stencil. We're going to do an orange hex mesh up the front of the cowl, about 2/3 of the way up the cowl, and also paint his helmet this really bright, vibrant orange. So I'm excited, and I'm excited to show off these stencils. Fallout Hobbies is great company. Ron's a good guy. I've known him for a long time, and he makes a really great product. So I'm excited to share that with you, and this color scheme, because I absolutely love this color scheme. If I were to ever do an Eldar army, I would 100% do this scheme again. So first things first, we're going to do the bone, and for that I'm using Vallejo Model Color English Uniform, which is this kind of gray, or not gray, greenish brown color. German Camo Beige World War II, which is another, has a greenish tone to it, but it's just a little more beige than brown. And then ivory for the majority of the bone color. So first things first, we're going to do a full base coat of that English uniform, and I primed the models black, but then I went back over them with airbrush primer with white. And the reason I do that is twofold. One, you can see the black still stays in some of those recesses, so you kind of get a little bit of shading there. But most importantly, white airbrush primer just doesn't stick very well. White primer in general just doesn't stick very well. So the black adheres really well. So we're going to start off with black, and then the white will cover the black really nicely. So we don't have to worry about that. But it does give, it's not a zenithal prime. Like, I'm not priming to get any kind of pre-shade or anything like that. It's entirely just due to coverage. Let me get this stencil out of the way so it doesn't get prematurely painted. Get some English uniform in there. And I haven't painted this scheme in a while, so there might be a bit of a learning curve. The orange is really what makes this scheme pop, obviously. And then for his blade, we're going to be doing kind of a cucumber green color, really soft color to counterpoint the orange, but not take too much away from it. So we're going to start with the body of this guy here, and just give a light base coat of this English uniform. And if we base coat something and then go back and decide maybe that should have been orange or something like that later, that's okay, because this base coat is going to work up to a very, very light tan, or bone color, which will be very easy to cover if we want to do that at a later time. Of course, we want to plan everything out ahead of time, and so we don't have to do things like that. But sometimes it happens. Sometimes you change your mind and you're like, oh, I really wish I had done that in this color. You don't have to go back and kind of remask everything, depending on what it is, of course. But his body is pretty straightforward, and you can see it's a nice, rich kind of earth tone. But there is a little bit of a green hue to it, and that's going to come in handy when we come in with that German camo beige. Excuse me. That green tone is gonna complement really nicely. So, and we're just gonna get an overall base coat with this English uniform. Every time I paint Eldar, I'm reminded of how much I enjoy painting Eldar. They're just such great models. They're so fluid, and they take the airbrush so well. They're just a joy to paint. I just love painting these models. The army that I had was a very small army, and it wasn't very good. It was just kind of stuff that I wanted to paint. So it was a few jet bikes and some Wraith Guard. If you go back on my Facebook or my Instagram, you can see pictures of them. This was back in 7th edition, and I was like probably the only guy in 40K and 7th edition that couldn't figure out Eldar. So I transitioned to Adeptus Mechanicus after that, and I was really happy that I did. That was a fun army too. So we got that base coat there, and really that's going to be the deepest shadow, but we wanted to establish that tone overall for the model. The majority of the model is going to be that German camo beige color, And then the highlight is going to be the ivory. So the ivory is what's going to give it that really bone look. But this is a darker overall kind of bone color than you might typically see. And it just complements that orange really well. The green tones are really nice in this bone because, and it's super subtle. I mean, if you pick up this paint, you're not gonna be like, oh wow, that's green. But the reason it's really nice is because of all the red in the orange. So that provides a really nice contrast, really subtle, but really nice contrast. Whereas if we were doing like a really warm bone, it wouldn't stand out as much. It wouldn't contrast as much. So we're going to kind of do an overall, but we want to leave a little bit of that. English uniform just at the very edges on the outside, because this is going to be underneath. This is going to be underneath the jet bike, so we don't need to super highlight this because it's going to be obscured. It's not going to get a lot of light under there, basically. Just the light, basically just the light that reflects off the ground. But we are going to highlight that up using the ivory. It's just not going to be as forceful. So when we're highlighting this guy, I put him on a base, which makes him kind of lean back a little bit. But we have to remember that when he's on the jet bike, he's actually leaning forward a pretty good amount. So like if I bring this jet bike over here, this guy's actually leaning more like that. He's not leaning back in the jet bike. So when we're highlighting, even though we're painting him separately, we want to keep in mind where or how the model is going to be positioned when it's finally placed. Because if I just highlighted this as it is now, the lighting is going to be a little different than if I remembered to tilt this base forward so that I get the right lighting. And this is basically going to be, whoop, it's all right. Come on. Airbrush was acting up a little bit, so I just sprayed a bunch of paint through and then just tested it on the glove to make sure I'm getting the flow that I want. So coming back here, definitely the top of his little Eldar have a little backpack back there. So I definitely want to get that. And then side of his leg there, side of this leg. But I want to leave like the underside of the torso. So if you turn the model upside down, you can see. So we have that highlight going on there. I was spraying that pretty far away from the camera. Sorry about that. So we have the highlight, but on the underside of the model. So you can see kind of in the armpit area and under the arms, especially under the legs, especially, we still have that English uniform, and that's exactly what we want. So when you're looking from the top, he's highlighted pretty traditionally, and then we're just going to accentuate that with the ivory at the next step. But we want that English uniform in the shadows to really give it depth, because if you just went with the beige and the ivory, it's not It's not as interesting a scheme, it's not as rich a scheme as making sure you leave that English uniform. Now these, because these are kind of exposed and in an area of prominence, these are going to be mostly that beige color. We're going to leave very little of that English uniform showing on the top of the jet bike itself, but we will leave it. So when we come back to highlight these veins back here, we're going to work from the back or from the outside in, and we want to leave a little bit of that English uniform right there on the inside edge, just to give it a little bit of depth. But you can see on the back, underneath here, and on the back of these is still that darker brown, and that's going to give some nice depth to what is on its face a fairly straightforward color scheme. So coming back here, we really just want to do kind of the outside there, maybe a little bit on that, and just a little whisper down the middle. But this is much darker, so I just hit that with a little bit of beige in the middle there. The outside of these little veins here is going to be more beige, but the inside, we want that English uniform to be showing through, again, to give it a little more depth, a little more interest. And then when we're highlighting the cowl of the jet bike, we want to try and leave the lower part of the cowl darker, highlight up to the middle part here, but we want to make sure that we leave a shadow on the underside of each of these little nodules here on the side. We want to make sure to leave a shadow there to kind of emphasize that shape, and we want to leave a shadow on the side here to emphasize that shape in the middle, and then we'll highlight it up to the ivory here at the tip. But right now we're just concentrating on getting the shadow, and again I'm going to use the model to my advantage, and I'm going to angle it, and I'm going to come in so you can see that node right here. Oops, excuse me. You see that node right here? I'm going to spray the paint over the top of that this way, so that, and not straight on. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it so I'm not spraying in that shadow, and I'm also not spraying on the side of this node, of this kind of central vein here. So I'll show you what I mean. So we've got that nice kind of beige color there, but if I turn this, we've maintained that shadow on both the central vein and on that node on the left side. The shadow's a little much on the left side, so I'm going to tilt it up a little bit more, and I'm going to hit it from that angle. And there you can see we have that nice shading on the bottom and on the side of the center. There you go. On the side, on the bottom of the node and on the side of the center is still that English uniform. So we're going to do the same thing on this side. When I'm spraying across the model, across that node there. And my airbrush is really acting up right now, but I'm going to try and muscle through it just because we're right at the end of this color. And we have another color going on top of it. So if there's a little bit, now I'm just drying it out to make sure So there we have, there you can see that shadow on the side of that node there and on the side of the center vein. And we can always come back and kind of glaze in like that. The side of the center got obliterated a little bit, not obliterated, but toned down a little bit. We can always come back and glaze in a little bit of that shadow with a brush. So here we're going to focus on the outside, and we're really going to leave that center dark. I'm just going to put that on its side to draw. Oh, and then on the side of the vein back here, we're going to concentrate towards the front and leave the back kind of third with that. Beige. So that is the mid. Now, my favorite part, the highlight. Excuse me. So this is Vallejo Model Color Ivory. Vallejo Model Air Faded White is a little too warm for this, so I used the ivory because it is this kind of cool in temperature, kind of bone color. Oh, there it is. And this is going to be a real step up as far as brightness, as far as kind of how vivid this bone color is. So we've really been laying the groundwork so far, and then this is where it really starts to translate to, oh, this is bone. You know, right now we're still in like Khakiville. So starting with the rider again. I know this is going to rate as almost white, but you can see like on the sleeve we're going from that ivory, and then we want to make sure that it goes all the way back to, we want to make sure that we're leaving the beige. We don't want to highlight this to the point where we lose that beige color, because that's what gives us the depth. And again, on the back, so we're going to leave kind of his shins in shadow, and then in the back, just like we did on the Space Marine tutorial, we want that middle zone of the model to be darker to elongate the figure. And for this particular model, because he's going to be mounted like that, we can hit the side of that little shoulder area just a little bit, because that's a little stark right now. But that's good. Just lighten it up just a touch. But we want that midsection to be in shadow. And so this is actually, I'm super happy with that. That's going to look good, especially with that orange. And you'll see the orange. I can't wait to paint the orange. The orange will be, of course, here in a few minutes. And we're going to paint the helmet and the hex mesh at the same time, because it's the same progression. And this, we want to keep that ivory into the middle of the gun. Again, that fades from that nice English uniform up to that ivory. And again, I know its rating is almost white in the video, but if I put it next to like pure white, you can see it's definitely off white, right? It's definitely a light kind of bone color. It's not white. So rest assured. And then we're gonna, do an edge highlight and oil wash and all that jazz. So, but the oil wash is gonna be very, very light. It's not gonna be an overall wash. It's gonna be a pin wash, a true pin wash, just to get all these little bits here and just the overall, all the nooks and crannies on the jet bike, and make sure that all those are properly shaded. So here we're going to work on the back edge and the outside edge here. So we're going to leave, come on, clearly time to clean my brush. It's not being super cooperative right now, but there we go. And then we're going to hit just a little bit on that. And we're spraying straight down onto that element to try and maintain a little bit of that shading on the side of it. Same thing here, outside edge, back edge. And we're starting to get some good shading there. Now, the saddle and this area, let me put this down real quick. So the saddle, and this area, this distance between the footrest here and the saddle, this is all going to be underneath the rider. So we're not going to highlight that. We're going to leave that alone. Because obviously the light's not getting under there. We want that to stay in shadow. We don't want that to be super bright. But we are going to highlight the front of the little intake vent there, the top of the handles and the control panel. And again, top of the kind of air intake, the front of it. And we're going to leave the back of that air intake in shadow. There. Getting back to the vanes. Oop, almost forgot these. Obviously, so we're going to work at the top of those. Top of that. Top of that. Top of that. Those are pretty straightforward. Those are kind of no-brainers. But you can see on the back, they still have the shading, and on the underside, absolutely still have that dark shading. So we're going to leave that. We're not going to touch that. Outside kind of third of the back of these veins. And then the front kind of third or half, depending on, like, that's good. We just want some transition on the back and the front. It doesn't have to be exact. It just has to be some progression. There has to be some shading, because when we do a nice crisp edge highlight on that, it's going to look really good, and it's going to look finished, right? We don't want parts of the model that look unfinished. So here, real light just on the very outside edge, because again, this is in shadow. This is underneath the bike, so we're not going to over highlight the stuff under there. Little bit on the front of the air intake, and that's all we're going to do. We're going to leave that. We're going to leave all that middle portion, that kind of lightly highlighted English uniform, glazed with beige, because we're not going to go down and edge highlight all that stuff either. We're going to leave that, but we do want to hit, and this I'm going to spray sideways, because I do want to hit that front part, but I don't want to hit all the stuff behind it. So I want to get the front of the air intake, but I don't want to spray like the foot pedals and all that stuff behind it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray sideways across it. And that's going to let me, because I've already highlighted the outside of this, so I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about if I try to spray this thing straight on, I'm going to get that curved area under there, which I don't want to get. And I'm going to get the foot pedals right here, which I also don't want to get. So by spraying sideways across that vent, I'm just getting the front of the vent. I'm getting the inside of the vent, but that's fine. I don't care about that. The main thing is not getting those other elements that I don't want to be ivory, that I want to stay dark. And that saves me time from having to go back and redo the English uniform. Or if I don't notice that it happened, then I'll just have some funky lighting, which I also don't want. So here we're just sticking on the outside. Oop, got a little squirrely, so I'm just going to even that up. And when that dries, it'll tone down a little bit. So you can see we still have some shadow in the middle. That was a little heavy. I'm not 100% happy with that. But again, it's the underside of the model. I'm not going to go back. I might go back because that was a little heavy. So you can see how much lighter that is than kind of the rest of the shading underneath the model. I might glaze down some beige and just knock that down just a little, just a touch. I'm just making sure that the nose of this is dry, so if I put it down, it's not going to pull paint off the bottom of that. Perfect. There we go. And same thing here. We're going to spray over the top of the little nodes here. I'm going to spray across the central vein to keep that shading. And then we're going to do it on the other side. And we were able to keep that shading. And we're just letting it do the work for us because we want those nodes to be accentuated. We want those to be well defined. They're a key part of the geometry of the cowl. And if we just paint them entirely one color, we're going to lose that really cool element that is that kind of aerodynamic design there. And then again, coming down the center part of the cowl, we want to try and do the same thing so we maintain that. Ooh, a little bit of spatter there. I was trying to move too fast without double checking. That's okay. That's okay. There we go. And now we'll come back and just finish out the ivory here. Come on. And this is going to be twofold. This is going to be our ivory, but it's also going to be kind of the base coat for the orange, or not the base coat, the undercoat for the orange. So we want that to be a little brighter, which will give us a little more vibrant. Come on, there we go. I just want to close that gap. Man. There we go. So that's nice. I am super happy with that. We have some good shading on the sides there. Some good shading on the bike itself. And it looks like a lot of this bike is left in shadow, and that's done, intentionally. I mean, there's a lot of this bike that either isn't going to be exposed or is going to be under somebody's leg. So we want to make sure that we're being consistent with the lighting, even though we're painting in sub-assemblies. And that's really one of the challenges of painting in sub-assemblies. And so I'm going to do something here. Sorry, this tutorial is going to be a bit longer, but I think it'll be worth it because this brush is acting up on me right now. It's not getting a good, even flow, but I don't want to pause the tutorial. So there's obviously a clog in this brush. So I'm going to do a field repair and I'm going to film it. So what I do is so usually the needle's out like that, right? So usually what I'll do is loosen the needle, pull it back to here, and then I will take off the front, and then I'll pull out the nozzle, because that's where the clog's going to be, is in the nozzle. And I'll run a little water through it to see if I can knock out any big pieces. And then I have a collection of bent and messed up airbrush needles, because it's just inevitable. You're going to do it. Don't throw them away. And you can see in there's a little bit of red paint. There's probably some other stuff in there. And what I'm going to do is real gently, I'm going to poke, and you can feel, and I don't know if you can see, but coming out of the end of this nozzle are some little chunky bits. And I can feel there's some more kind of chunky bits in there. There they are. And that's just dried paint and stuff that gets accumulated in there. And that will absolutely restrict flow and restrict paint. I could do a deep clean. I will do a deep clean after I finish filming. But for just keeping going painting, so you can see there, that's all just paint, old paint and stuff that came out of the nozzle on my airbrush. So hit it with a little bit more water, and then I'm actually going to get one of my special little Q-tips here. And these are Tamiya Q-tips, and I don't have the product information because I lost the label, but these are little pointy, very firm Q-tips, and they fit right inside a Badger airbrush nozzle. And you can see that they're pulling stuff out of there, cleaning that out. And when I do a deep clean, I use these as well to clean out the inside of the nozzle, because I spray, primer, I spray varnish, and both those things, attach to metal. That's why we use them, is because they attach to any surface. They adhere to any surface. So if there's a little just speck of paint in there and you shoot some primer, that primer is going to pick up on that, or the varnish is going to pick up on that and adhere to it. So now that feels pretty good. So now I'm going to take that little Q-tip, and I'm just going to twirl it on the inside of the airbrush. See, we got a couple little chunks in there. I mean, it's 100% time for a soak and a clean for this airbrush. But I don't want to stop, and I think this is valuable. So I'm going to keep going. Spray a little water through the brush itself, and then just put the nozzle back on. Screw that back on there. And then I'll just push the needle back, make sure it's seated, test spray some water, and that's much, much better. I can just feel that it's way better. And that's just a quick clear out the clog kind of field repair. And then when I'm done painting tonight, I'll take it downstairs and I'll break it down, and I'll do a full deep clean. But sometimes, like, if that works, it's just not, I just saved myself like an hour doing a deep clean on the airbrush, and I can continue to paint while I have time to paint, while I have time and energy to paint. And then I can always come back and do a deep clean. And if that doesn't work, I'll stop. I'll do a deep clean. But usually that'll work well enough to finish the session when it starts acting up. So I'm going to set these pieces off to the side because I don't want that. I don't want those orange elements that I'm going to be spraying around anywhere near those guys. So I'm going to put those off to the side. And we have the helmet. Oh, let me get this back into kind of the workspace here. So we have the helmet, which is going to be entirely orange. I'm going to paint the face plate black, but I'll do that with a brush. And then of course we'll paint all the gems and the gold and all the cool stuff. So faceplate, and then the faceplate's going to be back. The whole helmet is going to be orange, and then we're going to do that orange hex mesh up the front of the jet bike. So without further ado, we are going to get our hex mesh. I'm going to zoom out for this one. This is a little, so I know you can't see anything, but there are 3 sizes on this sheet. There you can see a little bit. So we have the largest on, there we go, largest on the far right, kind of the medium sized in the middle, and then you have really, really small hex mesh on the left. We're going to be using the size in the middle. The size on the outside I use for like wave serpents and things like that. Looks rad. But we're going to do the middle. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the jet bike and we're going to see how much of this stencil we actually need. So we're going to see how much of the stencil we actually need. We don't need to peel off. This isn't one long strip. We don't need to peel off that whole strip. So, but we do need to cover the whole jet bike. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an X-Acto and very carefully and lightly, I don't want to cut all the way through this whole sheet. I'm just going to cut the stencil sheet. Put the jet bike off to the side. The thing that's nice about these stencils is that they are reusable. So you can use just this piece that I cut out. You can use this more than once. Then we're going to come in here. We're going to grab a corner and start peeling very gently. And we want to go slow. Obviously, we don't want to tear the stencil, but we also don't want to pull up any of the kind of filler pieces, and then we have to go through and pick out, like if there were still pieces on the inside, we'd have to go through and pick those out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to map this out on the jet bike. And we are going to, so I don't want, here, this is a good example. Doing this on a curved surface is a little tricky, but we're going to get through it. So what I don't want is I don't want like one of these hexes to be right over the nose cone of the jet bike. I want it to land a little bit higher because I want that to read as that first part being that hexagon, and then we have the center line with the stencil. So this line here, we can plot this along the center of the cowl of the jet bike, and that way we make sure, that's all right. Make sure, so we hit that line right on the nose of the cowl, and then we make sure that the rest of the stencil, that's a little off center. And if you're going for a more organic look, obviously you don't have to be this careful, but I do want it to be pretty straight. It's still a little bit off, leaning to the right. I think it's because I keep pulling it with my right hand. There we go. Now we're in business. So now I'm going to go down the center line, and I'm going to gently push that stencil on, and then that will adhere. And now I'm going to pick a side, and I'm going to roll this on, because the most important thing is that this is really nice because it is super flexible, it's super adhesive. So like it's going to go around like this little node here, this little gem here. This stencil is going to conform to that, and we can go over this node on the side of the cowl here. Even though we're not going to be spraying orange all the way up here, we're going to stop probably around here. We want to make sure that this stencil is seated so that any kind of that mist or that overspray that kind of makes it up there, that it stays in the pattern, that it doesn't just kind of bleed out into like a random just kind of blah. We want it to fade out with a pattern, with the hex mesh still intact all the way up the cowl. And we just get in there and just push down, and that will adhere the stencil around all those nooks and crannies. And then we kind of look down and see like we still have some kind of gaps there, but that's okay, because when we're spraying this, we're gonna try and spray just straight on, right? And that is on there, nice and tight. Make sure we get the nose, because this is really tough to touch up. Like if you don't have a good seal on this and you kind of get a weird kind of spray pattern, that's tough to come back from. You really just have to respray. So hopefully that doesn't happen. If that happens, you'll learn how to fix it. But if that happens, I might edit this tutorial back before the field repair and just do part 2 with the hex mesh. I'm kidding. Kind of. So for the orange, this is the recipe, and this is like orange. I mean, this is like in your face orange. If you want a really vibrant orange, this is the orange. So we're going to use Vallejo Game Color Bloody Red for the deep shadow. Then we're going to do an overall base coat of Vallejo Game Air Hot Orange. And this looks red. It is a very, very red orange, but it's absolutely orange. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go back with the highlights, the highest lights, and we're going to do white over just where the highlights are going to be. Then we're going to hit it with this Vallejo Game Color Orange Fire. Then we're going to hit it with gold yellow to get a really, really rich highlight. I love this color, if you couldn't tell. We're going to hit it with this gold yellow to get a really, really rich highlight. If it's too yellow, we're going to go back with the orange fire and glaze it down a little bit. But we'll probably have to do that. I was going to say we probably won't have to do that, but we'll probably have to do that. So we're going to do the same progression with the helmet and with the hex mesh. So those two colors are going to be the same. But the hex mesh is going to be a little bit different, and you'll see why. It's just we're going to be going from the hot orange. Ooh, I better move these out of the way. It's going to be more hot orange up here. Excuse me, as it fades out, because this is going to fade out to bone. There's going to be like half full kind of hex mesh back here. So that's going to be more hot orange, and the orange fire and gold yellow is really going to be concentrated up on the top, on the front of the cowl. That's where it's going to be the most intense, and then it's going to fade out as it goes down on each side as well. So first things first, we get our bloody red, and we don't need much of this. We're just doing the deepest shadows. really just the underside of everything. And we want this to be nice and thin. Because again, we don't need all the coverage in the world from this. I'm going to move this out of the way because bone, and I'm going to move the stencil sheet out of the way too. Bone and like reddish orange just do not mix. If I get some overspray or something, I'm going to hit it. So look at how much nicer this is shooting after that field repair. Super happy. So this is a bit wonky. I'm actually going to bend that so I can get under there. That's not going to affect anything down the road. So it's one of the reasons I like mounting heads like that, is it gives me a little bit of flexibility. So you can see how, I mean, this is like red. Okay, let's get back into business here. So underside of the helmet and underside of the front of the helmet there. Kind of under the eyes, really. And then we're going to try and hit the underside of the back. Maybe this deep corner at the base of this neck vein thing here. So that's cool. That's all we're doing with the bloody red on the helmet. And then the hex mesh is going to be even less than that. So we're going to come make sure that that front part doesn't move. Since I'm not going to be reusing this stencil, I'm just going to fold it over because I think it'll make life easier. So, come on. And of course it didn't make life easier. That front like tab on the stencil was so heavy it was dragging the nose up, which is not what we want. So we just want to make sure that we're getting kind of even length on both sides. And yes, it really is that red. I mean, this is red. But like I said, this is just the first color. We have like 4 to go. So we're going to be toning that down. Now we're going to do an overall with this hot orange from Vallejo Game Air. So it looks super red in the bottle, but you can see here is orange. So again, we're going to move the jet bike out of the way. We're going to get the helmet. There you can see like how, and this is an overall base coat. So far this guy is super dark, right? I love this color. This is a great color. I should use this color more. But it's like a true, I mean, that looks pretty red. You can see it on the top of the vein there. That's orangish. It's definitely a reddish very red orange. The orange obviously is going to come from the orange fire. We're just really setting those shadows. I think one of the issues that people have painting orange is that they don't set kind of deep enough shadows, and the whole thing kind of just ends up being this kind of medium orange color, which doesn't really rate. So that's cool. That's as far up that cowl as we really want to go. It's a little bit more than half. It's about half, maybe a little bit more. But the overspray is going to be more, right? So even though the hot orange I stopped spraying right there, the orange travels another full hex mesh section, and then very, very lightly into the section beyond that. So it's actually traveling like 5 or 8 millimeters further than we might really realize. So if we were to go another hex mesh up, it would go all the way to the end of the bike, and that's not what we want. We want the bike, the part of the cowl closest to the rider, to be just that bone color. We don't want any orange up there. We want it to transition from this really vibrant orange all the way up to that bone color. I've done it when I was doing test schemes, I did the whole cowl, and it didn't look nearly as good as doing like half the cowl. So now we're going to come in with that Vallejo Model Air white, Vallejo Model Color white, thinned quite a bit actually. That might be, we're fine. And make sure this is dry, and then spraying straight on. We're going to concentrate again at the front and the top of. Ooh, that is thin. I mean, you want airbrush whites to be super thin, but that's taking it maybe a step too far. So just a little bit more. And we're going to let that dry because I don't want to. There we go. I don't want to mess with that. There we go. Okay. So that is drying. I'm going to come in. There we go. That's much nicer. Still very thin, but that's much nicer. So now we're laying the groundwork for that orange fire. And you can see again, we've stopped about a hex mesh short of where we stopped with the orange fire. So we stopped on this one with the orange fire, and we're stopping on, we stopped on this one with the orange fire, and we're stopping on this one with the white, because again, that overspray is going to carry, and we want that orange fire to be the fade out. We don't want we want the hot orange to be the fade out. We don't want the orange fire to be the fade out. So here, this is where we have to be pretty careful, because we're just doing the highlight. And the less enthusiastic we are about the white at this stage. So here I'm spraying straight down onto the side of this helmet, because I don't want to get that middle area with the white. I just want to hit those elements on the side of the helmet. So I'm going to spray, again, we're using the model to do the work for us. I'm going to spray straight down, and that keeps just highlighting those outside elements and leaving the inside elements close, right next to the helmet, or the helmet itself, that dark color. But then you go on the top of this protrusion on the side of the helmet, and it's white, and it's ready to take the orange fire and get a highlight and have the highlight show up. So again, any opportunity, and that's just something that'll take. It'll just take some practice, and it'll take some kind of vision. Again, kind of spraying straight down, and then we turn the model, and we can see. Whoops. How stark, like that's really stark, and that's fine because the orange, oh my gosh, that was a little much, but that's okay. Remember, the faceplate is going to be, why is this acting up again? Man, definitely time for a cleaning. But we're going to muscle through it. I'm not going to do another field repair. We're just going to get through it. There we go. That's nice. So again, we don't want to be super, super aggressive with this white because we don't want to kill all those undertones. But we want the areas that are white right now are going to get that orange fire. We're leaving that red to get that beautiful transition, which you'll see right now. Like, you just stop talking about it and just paint it, and then you'll see for yourself. There we go. All right. And this Vallejo game color, Orange Fire. Like, you want an orange? I'll get you an orange. This is an orange. So we're going to take this Orange Fire, and we're going to hit. It's not going to be an overall, but we're not going to shy away. We're not going to shy away from the recesses either. It's not an overall coat. So you can see there a really nice intense orange that fades down to that red. We might come back and do a little glaze with hot orange or something to kind of pump those shadows back up, because I kind of overdid it there a little bit. So again, we're just going to make sure very lightly. We're going to make sure all that is down. And we're going to come in very light. Now we're going to get the gold yellow. And we're going to do a highlight with the gold yellow. In this, we want to be very judicious. We don't want to overdo this at all. So just on kind of the nose of the jet bike, I'm going to let that dry. Hit it again. So you can see we really lighten that up. That's nice. I like that. Happy with that. And top of the helmet. So top of that vein, top of the helmet. And you can see that just adds a really nice depth to the orange. It's still orange, even though we're highlighting with yellow. It's still orange. It just adds this really nice warmth to it. But it's 100% still an orange. 100% still an orange helmet, right? There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go back with hot orange, the Game Air, the kind of second to last. This kind of vibrant, dark red-orange color. And we're just going to hit the shadows one more time. Mainly, so we're going to come in on the side of the bike here. And we're not going to go all the way to the front, but we're going to hit the edge, about the middle half of the edge. And you see we just pumped up those shadows a little bit more. And now we're going to come back to the helmet and do the base, do kind of the base of the, base of the vein in the back. A little bit. Little just whisper on the side of the helmet. Just putting an upward angle just a little bit. And what that's going to do is just going to deepen the sides of the helmet and give us a nice transition. So it's going to deepen the sides of the helmet and give us a nice transition up to there we go. Nice transition up to the highest orange on the front there. So that's really nice. I'm super happy with that. Maybe a little, I just can't leave well enough alone. There we go. I think I went a little high on the side of the helmet with the hot orange, so I'm just going to get a little bit of that orange fire thinned and just try to glaze it down just a little bit so I can maintain those highlights. Ooh, hey now. And this is dangerous with an airbrush that isn't playing fair right now. So I'm just going to go on. Stop fooling around with it. Because it looks good. So, so I'm going to get a fresh background here. Whoa. Oh yeah. Don't worry, we're going to do the clean here in a second. We're almost done. If you don't talk to your airbrush and encourage it, you should. Airbrushes have feelings too. So, you can see, I'm going to put a glove on too so that my hand isn't Now I'll put a glove on. I'm not going to put a glove on to paint, but I'll put a glove on to show off the paint. So there you see that really rich yellow. Super, super happy with that. That's awesome. That's going to look really, really cool. So if we go back and we get our rider here, you can see how those colors work together in this scheme. It's awesome. I love this scheme. So, nailed that. Happy with that. And then this is the super fun part. This is the part where I either laugh or cry. So what we're going to do is we're just going to very gently start peeling. Boom. Okay. Whew. Breathe a sigh of relief. And now we have this really nice hex mesh, and you can see here where it's fading out as it gets towards the back, but it's still bone back here. That's exactly what we wanted. And here it's dark on the sides and it gets lighter on the top and lighter towards the end. We have that really nice orange going right down the center of the cowl that fades into this really dark kind of orange fire reddish on the side. That looks really good, you know, and then that ties in perfectly with the orange helmet. The rider, the orange helmet for the rider is going to be about there. I mean, lower and a little further back, but you get the idea. So those colors are going to work really well. Just super, super stoked. Super stoked with that. So that, at long last, is how to paint Craftworld She'enshar with the base coats, and then how to use Airbrush stencil from Fallout Hobbies. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned a lot. Also how to field repair your airbrush real quick if there's a clog. So I love painting this scheme. I can't wait to do more on this tutorial. Next up, we're probably going to focus on the rider and then get the rider dialed in and then knock out the bike. Or we're going to start it, or we'll do it in reverse. We'll knock out the bike and then we'll finish up the rider. You know, we'll see what I feel like. But the bulk of the heavy lifting on this model is done. It's one great thing about Eldar is once you do the airbrushing, you're a decent way of the way through the model, because what's really left is gemstones, edge highlight, eye lenses, these gold. I'm going to do these in gold. The little runic details here are going to be in gold, and the faceplate. And, you know, same thing on this guy, a bunch of gold, you know, a little bit of orange on the sash, and then, you know, his blade and stuff, but that's nothing extraordinary. So once you get through the airbrushing with Eldar, you know, you're a good ways of the way there. But again, this scheme, it's just so cool. I just love this scheme so much. Anyway, I'm going to let you go. It's been a long tutorial. Thank you for your support. Thank you for tuning in. And, you know, we'll see you soon with part 2, where we start detailing the model. And this one will come together pretty quick. There's some cool stuff, like especially doing gemstones. I love painting gemstones, but I also love edge highlighting. So maybe I'm just a little, you know, sick. But, but yeah, once you get, I have a you know, dead-on formula for gemstones that makes them go really quick. So thank you. And, you know, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments, and we'll see you soon. Have a great day.